So this lesson's presentation will focus on forms. This is a very important aspect of development or website development because you need forms in almost everything you do to collect data from the user, to allow them to log into a database, to check what they think or to receive feedback from them. And if you've ever used the internet to process any document, then you have used forms. So forms technically makes online applications or online businesses thrive. Without them, you can't know what's on the mind of the user. The user can supply data to you, to your database. And so you need to really get a good control of it. It's a very simple concept. In the past lessons, we discussed about HTML5, some of the blessings it came with. We spoke about the head, the body, semantic and non-semantic tags. Now, one of the things HTML5 brought, which was very cool, was it added new implementations to forms. And we'll take a look at that as well. So I would like to emphasize that forms also form part of the body tags. Okay. So your form elements go into the area of your body. So you have your doc type HTML, which declares the document as an HTML5 document. Then you have your head, which contains your metadata for the car set, your character set, and your metadata for the viewport, and your title. If you have other links and other scripts, you can add them on as well. Then you enter your body. Your body contains your body tags, maybe your headings, your stuff. Then it comes to a point where you like to deal with the forms. So today we will start by creating forms, and we are going to still use Sublime Text. So let's create a new form with Sublime Text. Sorry, I launched my Illustrator, which I use from time to time for vector graphics. Okay, so the structure, your form sits inside the body tags. Okay, inside your body tags. And so we need the structure of the HTML. First, we need to go and then set the view settings to HTML so that when we do something in HTML, it can pick it up as well. All right, so HTML, then it gives us the structure of the HTML document. Okay, so we are going to settle on that. We are going to settle on that. And this is the basic structure of an HTML5 document. Sometimes you have the language settings. In the HTML, you can set your language to English. It's also done. And your title, today's title, we'll call it forms. Okay. So we have very important things. And let's say we have a header, or like with HTML5, I told you that we can have a main and we can have inside the main, we can have a header. And inside the header, we can have maybe a logo, navigation, and inside the navigation, let's have a logo here, just for shady reasons. Logo, yeah. And then our navigation continues, and we can have some list items, which, but today's conversation is going to focus more on forms. So we want to see where our forms go. Our forms will begin with the article, right? The article, that's where our forms will sit. And in each article, we can have a section. So we can say, okay, section, we can have multiple sections in the article. So this for the first section, the second section. I'll say the first section, we are going to deal with some forms, some sort of forms. So inside the section, I have a header H2, which says form type 1. And we can have multiple, like I said, we can have multiple sections inside a form. And I told you that it's a body tag. Okay, so wherever we want our form to show up, that's where we are going to implement our forms. Okay. The most important part, forget about all of this. Okay, forget about all of that. If we go and we save this, we can save this in our experiments folder and call it form.html. And we can view our forms. We can view our form. Here. So now we have the form file set up here. And when I open with Firefox, let's see what happens. So my forms have started. Okay, my forms have started. Even though I've written a lot of code like the navigation, the image file, like they all don't show up because they don't have any content whatsoever. Okay, so they are placid. If I want it to show up somewhere, now I can say I'm opening the form tag. Okay. For the sake of clarity, I will start over here by saying forms, my HTML, and there are two, I'll say there are certain essential stuff which comes with forms, okay? Where you want it to submit, we call it the action. Where you want your form to be submitted. It's a property we call the action. Okay? And where you want it to, if I want, let's say, a file called submit.php to handle, and usually it's a script file. It's a script file that handles the processing of the form. To handle it, I specify that here, and then the method I want to use, the method I want to use to submit the form tells how whether I want to post them or I want to use get. So there are two methods, get and post. Post, when you use post, is more secure because the data from the forms are not found in the URL. So it wouldn't be found in the history of the browser. Anyone at all cannot just go into it and fetch the data. And once I do this, I come here and then I click. It looks like nothing has happened. When I refresh, it looks like nothing has happened. But now I can implement forms. Okay. So I can say input. Now I'm implementing a form, right? Input. I'll say email. I'll say type text or email, right? Email, and I'll call it user email. Now, one thing you have to know about an input is that an input would have a type, and you can give it a name. Also, you should give it a name actually, because when you start labeling your form, then you should make reference. So there's a name, yeah. So username is an email, right? So it's going to validate. Remember that inputs they are, as we call them earlier, self-closing tags. So you don't have an input opening tag and you don't have another input closing tag like this, like an input like that. No, it doesn't work that way. Okay. So if I do this and I write placeholder and say your email here, and I go to another input and say button, and I say type submit, and I give it a certain name like subscribe. Now we can go back to our page and see what happens. Now we are building a form just with these two. I've told it that whatever the user enters here, this is the input we were talking about. Okay. I've told it here that, well, this form submits to a file called submit.php, and it will use the method post. And the first field should be of the type email. Okay. So I'm telling it that what the user is going to enter here is an email. Okay. So treat it as an email, validate it as an email. Okay. It means that if I come here and I type and I click enter, it says, please enter an email address. It is treating this field as an email address. So only emails can go in there. Only emails can go in there. Nothing else can go in there. So let's say this type is for newsletter subscription. Newsletter subscription. And I said that the field, I need the newsletter of the user, and I need them to submit it. I need the email address of the user. I need them to submit it. And when he hits this button, it should submit it to this file for processing. So it will move from this side now to my submit PHP for processing. Submit PHP will contain the script that will sometimes validate and pass it on to the database. Okay. So this is where the placeholder is. The placeholder says that when nothing is written, I want you to put this text in there to guide the user, saying your email. Once he starts typing, the placeholder text gets out of the way. The placeholder text gets out of the way. This text, your email gets out of the way once it starts typing. That's what we mean by a placeholder. It holds the place. But once you start putting content in, then it goes out. And the button, I want to put a button here, and it's of the type submit. It's a submit button. So when the user hits it, all my data within this form should submit. Okay. So if I have nothing there and I click, ideally shouldn't. That's how you can use JavaScript to like make sure that this form isn't empty. And there is one way you can do that by adding required to this. If you add the attribute required to this input, it means that it will require an input. So whenever the person types, it doesn't type anything and click submit, it shouldn't permit the person. So now you see, when I come to this side and I hit, at first it was submitting, right? Without any data. When I take away the required, I save this and I refresh this, the form will be able to submit because that field isn't required. Okay, so when you have a required field, it prevents the form from submitting without any data being entered. Okay, and so this is an example of how a form is built. Okay, and this is without any CSS at all. You can add your CSS, you can add stuff that make it look better and look cool. So that is one way of looking at forms. We can say that, okay, for our forms, we want to write some CSS to work with. So we can say, okay, new tab. And then I want to view this as CSS. Yeah, as CSS. As CSS file, as a CSS file. I said treat it as a CSS file. Now I want to say treat my input. Every input should have, let's say, my input and buttons should have a border radius of, let's say, 10 pixel. Let me see how 10 pixel looks. Now I'm trying to save font or CSS, font style. So I'll go into experiment, and then inside my experiment, I want to hit styles. Inside the styles, and I'll say form.css. Okay. This means that when I come here for it to link to it, I need to come into my link. I need to include a link tag that allows me to access that style sheet here. So I can come here and then, so I'm just including a link to help me. I can see styles, get into my styles folder, and inside that folder, look for forms.css. Okay. And now when I hit refresh, we see something is happening. Something is happening. There's some border radius going on here. And I can do a lot of things to it. I can say, well, have a padding of 10 pixel as well. And then shadows, log shadow should be none. So now let's see what's really going on with my phone. Just with a little styling, let's see. My subscribe button is looking different. My input field is looking slightly different. And you can do a lot of cool things with it. Okay. You can do a lot of cool. I just wanted you to understand that there is not a CSS class. Okay. There is definitely not a CSS class. So I wouldn't let us, or I wouldn't cause us to go too much deeply into it. Okay. And you can give it some margin right so that there's some space between your input and your border. You can say margin right should be 10 pixel, or margin right should be 5 pixel. Okay, so now you have like 60. And these are some of the things you can, with this, it means that your user can just get in there, once they type, you say enter an email address. If the email is not proper, it's validating by the browser, okay, because I set the type to email. okay? Because I set the type to email, it's validating it as an email address. If I set the type to text, it's going to validate it as a text, okay? So now anything I enter should be accepted. Okay. So when I hit refresh, even though nothing has changed around, it's a text. The type has changed. So when I type anything, now it's acceptable. So you see submitted. It's not validating it as an email. Unless if I don't type anything, then it will ask me, please fill out this field. Okay. And so I just wanted to give you an overview of how forms work. You see a lot of forms having input and they have a type, right? The form elements having input and they have a type. Okay. And we'll kind of get to that as well, how we, and you have to understand that inputs are inline elements. Inline elements. We said we have block level elements and we have inline elements. So it means that they can lie next to each other. They are inline elements. And however you want it, you can style it. Okay. So if I need my, let's say, if I need my input to be separated from my button, yeah, what I can do is I can introduce a div. A div is a block level element. Okay. So if I introduce a division or a div, a div is like a placeholder. If I introduce a div, yeah, what's going to happen is now, because this element has become a block level element, it will push the other item beneath it. Okay. And a div is that close to each other. So I have to style the div and then say, okay, well, instead of margin right now, say margin is 5 pixels. So all over, there should be a margin all over 5 pixels. I save this. Once I save my forms, I come and then save this and then come over here. When I refresh, I'm seeing something different. So these are ways which you can create forms and make sure they work. I just wanted to give you a demo. Now let's go back to our forms. Okay. So most importantly, you have to understand that the form tags help you create a form. Okay. So don't ever forget, you have a form tag, and the form tag will have certain attributes, as we saw here. These attributes, so you can have two attributes, main attributes. There are other attributes as well. But these are the two main requirements. Okay. If the form has, let's say, a file that is uploading, then you see something like enc type, okay, encryption type, okay. So all of these things come to play, but at the end of the day, these are the major ones you need. The action specifies the place it's to submit the form to. So when I go to my web page, I hit refresh and I try to submit. Let's see what goes on. Here, it says that what happened. File cannot be found. There is no file or submit.php. I haven't written any file to handle that form, okay, or to send it to the database. So no such file exists. And let's look at the URL. The URL contains this, okay. If let's say I give it some data, let's say this is an input type, it's supposed to be an email. So I give it some data. Let's go back. Give it some data here, like manaya@gmail.com. I hit subscribe. It goes away. Let's look at what happens here in the form. We can't see anything because I use the method post. In the URL, we are not seeing that. But if I use the URL, let's say if I use the method get, and for this forms, and I come back here, and let's say I try to go back, refresh my form, and I hit subscribe. Let's see what happens here. So you can see that there are details here. My username's value has been set to what? Nanaya Ekwamwa at it's written as percentage sign 40. Okay. So when you use get, what happens is the details of the user can be lingering in the URL, and any bad person, can just go through the history and then pick the data of what was submitted. Okay. So get is for things like search engines, right? Let's say I want to search something. Then cool. Nobody needs that. Okay, cool. It's for more of like front end, but if I need to post data and I need to make sure that that data is secured, then I go in for the method post. Okay, I'll go in for the method post as a way to submit my forms. Okay, so the date is not a requirement, but I said if you want your files to be moved to the next line, then use a block level element so that you can have them push the other items over. Okay. So basically, this is how forms are built. And with time, you'll be building more complex forms. And there are several types of forms. Okay. So when we use the post, you saw the name like name, username is equal to Nanaya Requirement. So this is the name of that data. Okay. That field has a name that. So when we go inside here, you see that field username took the value this. If I have several fields, they will all show up with question marks in between them. So you have a question mark, username is equal to this, then you have another question mark, is equal to that, then you have another question mark. So it's continuous that way. But get is not a very secure way of submitting confidential data. Okay, you can use it for search engines, you can use it for search stuff, but you don't need it, or you don't use it for very secure stuff. So that's a demo. I wanted you to see how a form is built. And this is just for newsletter subscription. So the field will take an email of the user and then submit it to the database so that you have a built database of email addresses that you can send your newsletters to at the end of the day. Now let's look at HTML5 forms. Our conversation earlier, I told you that we focus more on HTML5 this time. I said the form tag is used to create a new form, which we've seen. I've demonstrated that to you. And the form requires two attributes. When we mean attributes, this is the form tag, right? That is the attribute. Action is an attribute. Method is an attribute. Okay. That attribute has the value. The action specifies the page to submit the form data to, right? And the method specifies which HTTP method, hypertext transfer protocol method, okay, by which the data is submitted. Okay. And I've demonstrated the differences between the get and the post as well. Now, form attributes. More of form attributes, you can have things like no validate. No validate is it disables the browser's default validation system. It disables the browser's default validation system. It means that do not validate. And you can have end type, things like end type. When you have end type, what that means is that maybe there's an element in your form that is uploading something. Okay, there's an element in your form or there's an input in your form that is uploading some data and you want to encrypt it. So you want to specify the type of encryption you need to use. And that's why we have enctype as an attribute over here, And this takes the value multi-part form data. Okay. Multi-part form data. So that's a little about more of form. The form tag has some attributes. So far, we've seen action, we've seen method, we've seen enctype, we've seen no validate. You don't need to use enctype when you are not uploading or the user is not uploading maybe documents or data that you need to encrypt in order to secure them. And no validate is sometimes the browser has some default validation, like what we saw. If I specify something, and sometimes you want to kick that off. And that's how we go about it. Now let's look at some form elements. The form elements, okay? Inside the form, what goes in there, okay? And we'll talk about basic input, how to do basic inputs and how to get them submitted. Okay? So if it's a text, how to go about it. If it's a password, how to go about it. If it's an email, how to go about it. Okay. And over here, we've demonstrated using, so far we've demonstrated using an email, right? If we pick it as a text, we can have another input as a text, right? And do certain things with it. Okay. So there's an email, your email address. Let's duplicate that for our text. Let's say we have a text beginning before the email. We can say your name. Your name is a text. Okay. If the person is giving us their name, it's simply a text. Your full name. Your full name is simply a text. So I can come here and say full name, and the placeholder is here, and I say it's required. When I do that, and I go back to my forms, I realize that when I refresh it now, I have your full name and I have your email address here. But remember, I'm styling them without the styles. If I take away, if I set this to a pound sign and save this, it means that now my styles wouldn't be seen. When I hit refresh, this is my forms without any styling at all. This is just HTML without any styling. And that's what our class focuses on. It doesn't focus on styling. We just added that to just enhance visibility and then as we go. Okay. So that is what we have here. The full name. And the full name shows here because we have implemented that in our placeholder. Okay. We have implemented that in our placeholder and we said that it should look at that. Okay. We said it should look at that. And okay, so full name over here. The full name, as you can see in the browser, the full name, your full name shows here because it's held in the placeholder. Anything you put in the placeholder will show up in the input. But once they start to type something, once the user starts to type something then the full name gets out of the way. And it's a way of guiding instead of having a label for the form. However, by standard, you see, some of these fields can be hidden, or by standards, one of the things that you can do is use a label for the form. So instead of having just an input, you can say a label, A label is like I'm labeling the form. This is a label for the name. What name you have for full name, right? For the input full name. And whatever you put here becomes your label, like name. Let's see how that looks. And so when I come to the form and I hit refresh, we see a name here. And if I have a label here, I can choose not to add a placeholder. I can choose not to have a placeholder here. So I can only have a full name here. Okay. So once that is done, I have a name here. I hit refresh. There's no, and the user can see, oh, that's my name and fill it right away. Okay. And it all boils down on the type of styling you want to do, the type of styling you want to implement. So there is no, and this is a label, right? Why this helps is that when machine readers pick up the form, they're able to know, okay, this form has a field that requires a name. And the label of the name is what they read to the person. That's okay. If the person is visually impaired and a screen reader picks it, it will read the label, that name. Then it will let the person input here. Then it will read another label. Okay. So some of these things, for the sake of HTML5, it's helpful. Okay. Very helpful. But that depends on how you want to go about your form. So instead of having a placeholder here as well, you can decide to have an email and say you want a label for, remember that for who? The label is for who? For this name, okay? So you always label for the name of the input. So with the input, this is the name of the input. So if you are labeling, you label for username and you put what you want, the content you want displayed on the page over here. So you can put, let's say, email. Um, that's it. You are getting some. Um, so that's a bit about introduction of forms. Okay, and so let's go back to our slides and then go and flip through. So if you want a text to appear now with a text, because it's a text, you can limit the number of characters they input. And that is done by using max main length, that is minimum length. Okay. The attribute minimum length can be that, and the attribute maximum length can also do that. It can help you restrict the user on what the minimum required is. So for example, you are asking for a name, the person can have a name that is only 2 letters. So you can say 2 or 3. The minimum should be 3 characters. And the maximum should be, you don't want too much of a long name too. So you don't want, so you want maybe a maximum of 50. Or for demonstration purpose so that we can get it. We can get to know. We want a maximum of 10. Okay. So now when we go back there in there to our forms, we refresh, and it looks like nothing happened, but something went on. If I enter N and I hit subscribe, it says, please use at least 3 characters. You are currently using 1 character. Okay, so that is done, or that occurs because we've set the minimum length of characters to 3. Okay, you can't have a name as only N, and you can't have a name as only NY. It will still restrict me. And these are validation attributes. We call them validation attributes, like name length, like max length, like required. Required makes sure that that space is not empty. So if I fire and the space is empty, you say, please fill out the space. It means that this is required. This is what required is doing. If I fire and this place has only 1 character, another validation kicks in. That one kicks in, the minimum of 3. If I fire and let's say, oh, my name is too long, you see, even as I get to 10, it constrains me from typing any further. It means it's telling me that I can't type more than 10. My name shouldn't be more than 10. I can't type everything. So I can have my first name, and I can only have my last name. I can't type. Okay, so that's about validation attributes. Okay. When we say validation, it's a strategy to ensure that your user is supplying you with data that is valid. You need valid data because you don't want your database to be filled with junk. So they can be supplying data that is of when you feel people are filling your data, but your database is getting full, but the quality of the data is junk. And so that's when we implement attributes that help us constrain the user to prevent or to guide the user. Okay. Let's say that they don't intend to leave the form fields empty, but they filled let's say, the name, and they forgot the email. So this is a way of reminding them to supply you the data. They don't mean any harm, okay? But they just forgot one of the fields. And so sometimes these validation techniques help you get the best out of these forms. Okay. And so that is one thing about min length and max length. So let's continue. So over here, I said if it's a text, then you have your inputs. First, have an input tag open, right? I told you that the input is a self-closing tag, so you don't need to close it. Then you specify the type of input. Now, the type of input can be a text, can be a password, it can be an email. Each of the type you select or you specify here has its own behavior constraints. So that means that the user will be required to input certain things based on the type of inputs you selected. If you select text, it may allow it to write anything at all. If you select email, it will ensure that the data submitted by the user is an email address. If you select password, it will hide that field, okay, so that when they are typing something, it's not too visible. So there's a placeholder text, enter your username. It's going to show up there. The main length should be 4. That is the minimum length should be 4. The maximum length should be 20. And that field is required. Required means that when the user forgets and leaves it empty, it will prompt the user. Or if the user intends to get away with that part of the form, it will prompt the user. So the user cannot submit the form without filling that part. So let's look at password. It's similar to the input type. So you have your input here and you have the type set to password. And there is this new thing called pattern here. And this is in HTML5. HTML5 allows you to implement patterns. Okay, patterns. In patterns, we call this a regular expression. a regular expression. A regular expression is something that ensures that um, certain fields that users are filling meet a certain defined criteria. Okay, they meet a certain defined criteria, and we can have several regular expressions. We don't want to go too much deep into it because that's a whole topic on it. And you can find regular expressions for email address, regular expressions for telephone numbers, regular expressions for street addresses. It constrains the user and allows them to fill the right things. Okay, so you can write your own regular expression in this case. Okay, so let's say if you want the password to contain at least 8 characters, including uppercase and lowercase and a number. This is the regular expression for it. Once you specify that, then it means that now your password is able to do that. So let's tamper with the field of the password. And let's tamper with the field of the password. Okay, so now we have a full name. Let's say we have for email address. Let me make this email address available for email address. And now we are coming to create a password. Okay, so let's do it separately for ourselves. Okay, so now we bring a div because we want it to block. Okay, so that is it. And we don't want a password to have a label, but that depends on us. We can say, okay, we want the input. So this is the most important part, the input. Then you specify the type. Okay, the type, we want it to be a password. Then you want to name it and say user password. Okay. So now you have an input of a type and a user password. When we get there, let's see what happens in our browser. When you refresh, so there's a field, there's a password field, but it's not, we don't easily see that. Okay. So you can introduce a label here and say your password, or so a label for who? For this name, okay? For the username. So you have user password. Okay. User password. And when we bring it up again and we refresh, now we see there's a field requiring password. However, when we type, we won't see anything unless we start typing something. When you start typing something, you see it's hiding the characters, that's how a password field behaves. It's so that if someone is sitting beside and watching the screen of the user, they wouldn't see the characters the user is typing. So that's the field of a character, a password. But this one can, let's say, can accept anything at caol.com. So when I hit this, the form gets accepted. So you see, my username is that, my password is that. Okay. It says you want to, and that's how sometimes when you fill your email and it's done, it will ask you, you want to do this, you want to do that. Okay. This is the data it's submitting via post. All right. But you can also decide to constrain what type of password your users are entering. And that is when you have, so usually a password field is required and you can set your pattern. That's when you have a pattern, okay? The pattern is an attribute, okay? That ensures that it constrains the type of password your users enter. So they can't enter any password at all. Now they have to enter the password that conforms to your regular expression. So if I enter this as part of my regular expression that I want it to validate again, now there's a pattern I want the password to follow. If I save this and I go back, hit refresh. If I come here and I just type any password at all, it says, please match the requested format. So match the requested format. It means it doesn't match that format. Okay? It doesn't match that format. It doesn't match that. And for you to say, you can, as a placeholder, you can just say, you can provide some details in your label. Okay. You can provide some details in your label. And then you can also say in your, as a placeholder, and then say, placeholder. You can introduce a placeholder and then say, what were the requirements of our password? Password must contain must contain this. And let's see what happens. All right. So it must contain at least 8 characters, blah, blah, blah. It's going and going. And you can also set it aside. Once it will say use a secure password. When I type something that doesn't conform, it will say, please match the requested format. So that is about regular expression. Okay, that's about regular expressions. You can introduce them using patterns. Okay, patterns. And that is seen only in HTML5. That is seen only in HTML5. So that's one way HTML5 forms are more of a blessing. And we have the input type email. We've already done that. We've showcased how our email is done. So these are basic inputs, and I've given examples on the right. I will make the slides available. However, I advise something that do not just copy what is in the slide and paste, because when you copy and you paste, you won't learn what you need to learn. Okay? You won't learn what you need to learn. It's advisable for you to type instead. When you start typing, coding is that when you start typing, then your fingers start learning. Okay. Okay, so let's continue with other basic things. Okay. We've looked at the text, the password, the email. Now let's look at the telephone. Now with the telephone, it's a similar format. Okay. You have an input. The type is specified as TL, and it also implements a pattern. I told you when a pattern is needed. A pattern is needed when you need to constrain your users to follow a certain format. So in this case, you want your telephone number to conform to this particular format. So you can go in there and then, as we did with our sum line, let's create one for the telephone field. Okay. So name, we have a full name here. To constrain it, to help it, we can use a block level element, a div, so that we have an input. For the input, the type here is telephone. And we can give it a name, phone. Right? And when we insert a label, the label is for phone because that's the name. That's the name. So label for phone. And we have telephone. Okay. And then once that is done, you have some telephone showing. So now we can refresh and we have a telephone field. Okay. Can refresh and we have a telephone field then. Okay, it accepts this number, right? Maybe this number is not a proper phone number, but it accepts it. So if I want to constrain it, what I need to do is I need to implement a regular expression. That is, I need to add a pattern that constrains it from such behavior. So I can come here and then use that pattern we implemented there, saying it should conform to this particular pattern, copy this pattern, and then come and paste that pattern here. Meaning that now I'm constraining it to comply to that format. All right, so let's see. And to help the user, I can add as a placeholder text here and say format is this. I can add this placeholder text. Now the placeholder text kicks in if the user hasn't filled the form. So now be able to see that, okay, this is a format I need to implement. So they can fill this. If they decide to do this, say, please match the requested format. It still says, please match the requested format. So that kind of constrains the. So patterns in HTML5 are helpful too because sometimes you don't want to use, you want to validate the user's data front end before it even passes to your database, or you want to ensure that the data is right, it's correct. Now, a number, you can also set an input type to a number. For example, if it's an age or any number, and you can, that helps because it has um, validating attributes. It has validation attributes which are min and max. So let's look at how that works. The min is the minimum number they can enter. The maximum number they can enter. If they enter a number in between these two values, then it's going to work. Any number outside is going to work. So let's say we come here and then we say we want to implement a number by saying, okay, so this, the inputs, the type is a number, and the name is maybe the age of the person, and the placeholder is placeholder says that must be between 18 and 45. That's what the placeholder shows. When I come here to my browser and refresh, so we have a number there. It constrains me. You see this button, it constrains me from not entering things that are, but look at this. I'm able to go through 0, I'm able to go through 1, toggle through, enter any number. However, if I implement the minimum and the maximum attributes, the main attributes and the max attribute, it sets the boundaries for that particular number. So if I say my minimum should be 18 and my maximum should be 45, then that sets the boundaries within which users can play. They can't go to -2. -2 won't be accepted. 18, when I started, starting from 18. I can't go below. So I can hit, when I'm hitting my keyboard, the up is increasing the number, down is reducing the number. When it gets to 18, it halts. Okay. So now I can only enter, I can't enter like 230. Please match the requested format. But when I hit 18, then it goes, it's talking about, now it goes to validate this one. So that's the thing about max and main when it comes to validating numbers. It's important because sometimes you want to set the boundaries within which users can play. Let's continue with dates. So you can have an input to set to a date, and maybe you are requesting the birth date of the person, and a calendar will pop up in the process so that it allows the user to, so let's say after getting their age, I want their birthday. So I can come and say, this input should hold their birthday, and I set it for a date, right? A date, and I say, oh, birthday. And for my label, I set a label of birthday, but the label should be for birthday as written here. The attribute for helps maps this to this input. So here we are in the browser. Now my birthday is popping up, and I can set the month, the day, and the year. So the month is February, the day is 23rd, and the year is 1940. So 1940. Well, my computer doesn't believe I can go that much. 1940. Now I have it here. Or better still, I can just hit the icon here, and then it brings up my calendar here. And I can set the birthday. So that's one way. If the input type is a date, it allows you to specify a particular date. And you can use that for things such as date lookup can be used for appointment as well. Let's see how the date lookup looks like. The datetime lookup, datetime lookup. So the type datetime lookup for appointment, let's say after telephone, we go in for telephone, okay, phone. We go in for datetime lookup input. Date, time, lookup input. And the name is maybe an appointment. I want to book an appointment. And the label, I want to set a label for that appointment. Then I say availability. Let's say available. And once I come to and hit refresh, I'm expecting something to pop up on my telephone. So it allows me to set a date and a time. Okay. So date April 25th, 2025. Into April 21st, 2025. I can set that date. And then with the time, I can set the time as well, like 12:30, 33 p.m. So that's way when I click submit, it's going to send it to the person. Okay, well, appointment is set to this time. Maybe there's a form requesting for a doctor's appointment. Okay, there's a form I can put my user, my email, and I can put when I want to meet the doctor. Okay, so this is one way you can use the datetime local. Now let's go to the color. Color to you can specify a color as an input. The input type can be color, and it allows you to choose from a color field. So from there, let's get on with the color. Inputs, your type is color. Remember, your color is spelled COLOR. In the UK, COULOUR, but that is not the standard used for web development. Use COLOR, and you can see favorite color. The best color. That's the label that you tend to use. I can come here and then best color. She allows me to select a color that I want. Okay. And I can go by a panel this way. I can go by the sliders. I can go by this chart and say cyan. This is my favorite color. Or I can go by this and pick up my favorite color. Yeah. Okay. Once that is done, once that has been selected, and I close this, it's recorded. And it will, when I submit this, it will give me the hexadecimal value. Okay. To give me the hexadecimal value of the favorite color. When the user submits it, you can get it. So the input type can be color as well. You can have color as an input type. And the range. So you can have a slider, right? A slider that allows you to um, allow people to select their experience. So I can see a range of things. You can start from 0 to 100. That's the maximum you want to step onto. Let's say you have a questionnaire, and in the questionnaire, after you ask them for their favorite color, you want to ask them for their experience generally with your website. So you can say input, and the input type should be a range, and their experience. The name is the experience of your website, and the minimum should be 0, the maximum should be 0, the maximum should be 5. Your rating, maximum should be 5, and your stops should be 1. Step. Your step should be 1. It means that increase in 1 increment. Your increment should be in 1. So when I implement this and then this goes and I say label for who, for experience, and then I'll say your feedback, your rating. Should I go back and refresh And we have a slider here that allows the user to drag in steps up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the 0, that is a 5. And if you watch devices, you can use this to increase the volume. So when you press maybe the volume of an item, like let's say this, you see is increasing, my volume is increasing, and then I can increase it. This is a similar concept. Okay. The steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. You have like 16 steps. Right. So it's a similar concept that is used here. Your experience, and you can even go from 0 to 100, okay, depending on the width of the field you have. Now, always remember that these are responsive fields. Okay, so should I increase it? There can be changes. Okay. I can decide to set the width of these have default width. I can decide to set the width of the input field. That's okay. For each listing, make it feel 100%. Okay. Or make it feel 100%. Or I can decide to have their labels above. So if you have a label and you want it to sit on top, let's say for the label, this name, you don't want it to sit on the side, you want it to sit on top, you can just implement a break. Because you are still in an HTML, you can just implement a break here. And once you hit this, you see the name goes up there, and you have the entire field yourself. And you can do that for each of them, especially with your rating. The rating, you need the rating to be below. So your rating, break, then once you refresh over here, your rating should push it down so that there is a kind. And best colors, you can do a similar thing for best color. But at the end of the day, all of these things can be controlled in your CSS, okay? In your CSS. So it's advisable not to do too much of appearance work in your HTML. Just go into your CSS and then finish those things out and make the form really look good. Because these forms, as I said earlier, we haven't applied any complex, what do I say, styles to it. All right, so let's continue with other forms of inputs that we have. Upload, input file type upload is for uploading files. Okay, so if you ever fill the form that says that upload your photo, this is where that thing comes in. So input your file, the type is file, not upload. The type is file, okay? And you need to accept an image. And this means that all formats of images. And you over here, the star, you can decide to say accept image if it's a PNG, okay? Remove the format. So let's go and say DP. Let's say you want them to input their DP or upload their DP. Want them to name, telephone, and then input. This time is file and not upload. Take note. And then you specify the format as well. Yes. Formats it should accept using the accept attribute. Okay. We say you should accept an image, and this means star. The star means that accept all formats, all format, but it has to be an image. Okay. So I say here DP. And I can have a label and say, a label that says upload your DP. Great. And once that is done for what's the name, DP? Once that is done, we should be able to get along here and find and upload. So when I hit this button, let's see what happens. It opens, and I can upload something. I can upload a file. I can say screenshots this. And when I click open, see that file I selected, the name is here. I can browse and change my mind and say, okay, well, I picked up the wrong file. I'm going back to my downloads to see if I can get a nice. I can say www is my nice image. Pick a PNG for it, and that file shows up here. So, but once you decide to use this thing file, and it means that in your HTML over here, in your form attributes, you should have an end type specified, encryption type. Okay, should have an encryption type. So we have end type specified, and you come here and then you say the attribute, the type of attribute that you want to specify to upload it. You don't need this end type if you don't have any business like submitting uh, uh, what do I say? Uploading a file. So you are not uploading any file that you want encryption on, then you don't need that. Okay. But once you choose to do that, then you need an end type to do that. Okay, so that's for upload. And briefly, let's look at what end type that the form attribute. I said that end type specifies the type of encryption to be used for upload. So the end type is an attribute that you add only when you are using or you are uploading a file. Okay, and it's multi-type form data. That's what you set it to. Okay, all right. But you don't have any business doing that if you are not uploading anything. Okay. Now let's look at very often things we'll see. Checkboxes. Okay, checkboxes. Let's look at what checkboxes are. Sometimes you want to provide a list that allows the user to select multiple items. Okay, and multiple items. So we go down here and then say, and you can have, okay, so we come here before we end it. We want to say, okay, they should select um, uh, two of their favorite places they have visited, two of the favorite places they have visited. And to do that, we'll first let them list the favorite places they have visited. We'll let them, and it should allow them to select multiple things. Checkboxes allow them to select multiple. Okay, so let's try and then create some checkboxes. First, we have a div. We try to put them in a div. And checkboxes inputs, they are also forms of input, and their type is a checkbox. Okay, checkbox. And we can give it a name. Okay, that may be favorite food or favorite food. Okay. So that's the checkbox we are talking about. Now remember that each option in a checkbox needs to show. Okay. So the checkboxes need to have a label, right? So the option showing is the label, right? The label for favorite food. It's then I can say 3 out of the favorite food price. They should submit their favorite food, and I can have several such inputs. And the value, if it selects this, I want a certain value. Okay, this value should be equal to the favorite food should be equal to rice. So if you select this input, I want it to set the value to rice. Then I come below here and continue to say my next option, I want the input, the checkbox, the name should be favorite food. Now the value should be soup if it does that. So I come here and then soup. Then the checkboxes, my favorite should be cereal. My value should be cereal. And then I come here and say cereal. Okay. So once I've done these, and I go back to my HTML. Let's see what happens. So now I have these. If the user selects this, now the favorite food have been set to rice. One of them is set to rice. If he selects this, now there are two inputs, rice and soup. They have two values. So checkboxes can take multiple selections at a time. Okay. Checkboxes can take multiple selections at a time. Okay. So I can say, I can bring an H3 that says that select your favorite food. Okay. Once I hit refresh, now they have the option to select their favorite foods. Okay. If I want a checkbox, if I have a default that I want it ticked already, anytime the form loads, I can simply come to the side and say, okay, maybe I want soup ticked all the time. So I can come to the input soup and say check. And once I refresh my form. Okay, I say no. Okay. Once I refresh my form, I should have that checked by default anytime it's loaded. Okay. So this is what we are currently. We can decide that, okay, well, after these checkboxes, we want to create radio buttons. Now, the thing about radio buttons is that it allows you to select only one item at a time. You can have multiple items. So if you have a list of items, that's a list of options that you want the user to select like 3 at a go, then you need to go in for the checkboxes. However, if you need them to select one item at a time, then you need radio buttons. So instead of checkbox, you say radio here, radio, the type is radio, and the type is radio. And when we do that, let's see the behavior. We'll select three of the favorite foods. Now we have this, and it's already checked here. That's by default, it's checked. I want to take out the check. Right. So by default, we have rice soup, and it allows me to select one at a time. I can't select multiple items, but with the check boxes, I can select multiple items. Okay, so if you want them to select more than one item, then you go in and then you select the checkbox. However, if you need them to select only one item from your list, then that's when you adopt the radio button. Okay. So that's the input type for radio. So they are similar. It's just that depending on the behavior, depending on the constraint, like for example, if you are dealing with the gender, someone can't be male and female at the same time. For political reasons, maybe they say, but a gender, you are male or you are female, and you have to belong to one of them. So sometimes for political reasons, there will be forms that you are filling and they will say, prefer not to say, right? For example, let's say, so with this, if I say that this is not favorite food, but this is gender, right? I say, select your gender. And I come here and I name it gender. Gender, 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 and gender. And then with the values, this is the name of gender, but I want this value to be male. If he selects this, I want it to be male. And if he selects this, I want it to be female. Right? So I put the label female here. And if it goes to the third one, the value, I want it to be other, or prefer not to say. Or not stated. Prefer not to say. All right. So with these changes, when we come up here, now you are either female, male, or you don't want to talk about it. But you can't be male and female at the same time. So that's why sometimes you need to constrain the user in order to get the best data. And but with checkboxes, they can, for example, they can love all the three foods, and it's okay. Okay. So that is one thing with it. So these are checkboxes, how we implement checkboxes. And radio button. So we've already gone through an example with a radio button. This is how we implement a radio button. An example of how we implement radio buttons. And let's look at drop downs. Okay, drop downs. How to make a drop down, or let a person select from. So we use the select star, right? The select star to create a drop down. Create a drop down. So let's go into it and say maybe there's a div here and there is a select here, and the select has a name because, okay, so the name should be maybe, like we said, gender. We want them to use a select button because with a select, by default, it allows them to select one. So maybe they have the name gender, and now with a select, you have options. So option, there's an option and it has a male. The first option is male, and it has a value, right? So if they select this, you want it to set, you want the system to set a value to the name gender, right? So if they select this one, you want female to be set. Female to be set to it. And if they select the third one, then you want prefer not to say or not stated to be set. Not stated. Prefer not to say. Say. And there's a select, like I said, and you can give it a label, okay, so that screen readers are able to adapt to it quickly. So you have a label for the name gender. And you say select your gender. And let's go back on our page to see what's going on. So down here, we have a select down here. We say select your gender. Then, and sometimes people prefer to leave the first option no value, right? No value because they want to validate later on and tell the system that if the person selects no value, bring them back to the page. Okay. So let's go back to our page and then we see and refresh that. By default, it's set to male. So the first one is no value. That's where, and it can have a male, the person can be a male, and the person can be a female. The person can prefer not to say. However, in instances, like I said, in instances where we have this situation where we have people becoming either male and female, being able to, we can still use select. However, we add some clauses and say size so that it allows them to select multiple items. Size should be 2, and we add multiple to it. So when that happens, we can say now the person is able to select multiple items at the same time. So this is multiple selection. So I bring an H3 that is multiple selection to distinguish it. So that they can select multiple items. They can see I'm a male, I'm a female. They care what to see. But it gives them the option to select. Okay. So now multiple selection is down here. They can say I've selected male, I've selected female. I prefer not to say at the same time. Okay. So let's set multiple selection to 4 and see how it is. So this is multiple selection. Okay, male, female, prefer not to say. Multiple select at the same time. Okay. And this is helpful because sometimes you want them to be able to see all the options we have available. Okay. Let's move on. So that's a drop down as we did, and that's an example of multiple select. The difference between the multiple select and the normal select is that you just add the size of things you want to show. and you add the attribute multiple and allows you to select multiple items at the same time. So when it comes to the multiple select, it's important to mention that you can select multiple items at the same time, okay? As compared to the normal select. So this the normal select allows you to select an item one at a time, right? When it comes to the multiple select, you can select multiple items at the same time. You can select one item, and if you want to select the next thing, you put down Control or Command, and you tap on that thing again, and it allows you. You can even select all of them. Okay, so that's one advantage is with the multiple select. It allows you to select multiple things. It works just as the checkboxes. Okay, with the checkboxes too, you can select multiple items at a time. But if you need to select one item at a time, then you have to use the normal select control, as we see here. The normal select is for selecting one item at a time. And radial buttons over here are also used for selecting one item at a time. So it depends on the constraints you want set for the user. If you are giving them a list of items and it's possible that they can have more than one, then you either use a multiple select for them or use a checkbox for them. But if they need only one or they can only fall in one category, then you have to restrict them to use a radial button or the normal select button. Okay. So that's about the inputs. And let's look at some of these special elements here. These are still HTML inputs. Let's look at text area. Text area is for usually comment section. Okay. So you can have an item as we see here. You can have an item for select. We said there is a tag called select, right? For text area, it also comes with a tag. Okay. So most of the other input, the basic inputs come with a tag input. You can just do your inputs and then you specify the type of input. But when you get to selection, then you use the select tag to do that, right? This select, the opening, and it has an opening and closing tag. Select has an opening and closing tag. Similarly, text area has an opening and closing tag. So you have text area opening and closing. And what you put here, you can have a placeholder in your text area which says that tell us about yourself. And you can specify the number of rows. Okay. You can say rows should be 4. And you can also give them a name so that when you label them, the label can identify or hold the name as an anchor. So you can name this as bio. And we come and insert our labels. Okay, so first we need to put this in a div to help control we have a label here, which a label for bio. And I've already explained how the labels, so the label has the attribute for, right? And that for anchors to the input, right? and the input's name specified here is what is used for the form. So you have a bio, there's a label, and you can put something there like, okay, comment or biography. So let's go see how that shows up in our page. When we hit refresh, we have a small comment box popping up saying, tell us about yourself. If your bio doesn't look good for you, you can bring a break here. Your label doesn't look for you, you can bring a break here, and then when we go back so that the comment box sits below the, and you can see it has this draggable thing here, which you can extend. Okay, it helps you, you can drag it and then type. But the number of rows you specify will tell how vertically long it's going to look. Okay, so if I specify 2 rows, it's going to be shorter. It's only going to take 2 rows at a time. And by 2 rows, I mean like 2 lines. Okay, so first line, second line. Okay, but you can extend it and write as much as you can. But that is how by default it's going to appear to the user. So if you don't specify any number of rows, it will give it a default number of rows. So I didn't specify any number of rows, it gave me 2 rows. Okay. And so that's about text area. Text area is usually for comments. So sometimes you go and you can specify the width of the text area using the CSS. Okay. So I can come into my CSS and say that I want my text area to have a width of 100%, which means that take 100% of take 100% of the screen available. So when I click, you see now it extends to 100% of the screen. Okay. So you can, depending on how you want it to look, and you can give it any percentage, a smaller percentage like 80% or even 90%, or depending on how you need it to look on the screen. So that's a little about text area or the bio. Okay. Bio. And for my labels, because I want my labels to look a little bold, I can also format my labels and say, label, if your label, I want you to have special features. Display block. Block means push anything below if you're a label. And font weight should be bold. And maybe display a color of green to just, or indigo. Right. So let's see how that influences. There is not a CSS class per se, but I wanted to show how simple things can really make a huge deal on the appearance of your form. Okay, the appearance of your form. And all of these things, you can see that over here, because we inserted another break, that break also came up, right? So we won't focus much on styling, we focus just on the HTML. Now let's get back to and there is so now let's look at the next input, which is called data list. Now a data list constrains your users to a list or a suggested list you want them to enter. And that's what we call autocomplete. So as they try to input certain choices or certain options, you help them autocomplete by popping up that option that they can click to select to fill for them. And we will demonstrate that. Let's look at how a data list is created. Okay. So as we usually do, we'll create a div to hold that input. The first thing is we have an input, right? An input. And this input doesn't have a type. It has a list instead. And the list is maybe universities, right? And it has a name, uni. Give it a name uni. Now we want to give this a label so that the label can hold on to this. And we say favorite, the label should read favorite university. And this label is for uni. After doing this, we come and input our data list. That is the list we want popping up. And we use a tag called data list. Okay. This data list has an ID, and the ID should be the same as the list name specified here. So we'll give it the name universities. Okay. And we are now going to input the options which should pop up. So for option 1, interestingly, these options have values, and the value is the option item. Okay, so if I want University of Ghana, I just write UD here. And these options do not have a closing tag for a data list. Okay, so option 1 is UG. Option 2 is another university. Option 3 is also another university. Option 4 is also another university. Option 5 is also another university. So we are going to list some common universities in Ghana. KNUST is one of them. UCC is another. UNAIR is another. UDS is another. These are not listed according to their performance or anything. So it's just offhand, the universities which come and then. So we've created our list of options that we want open up when the user types any of them. Now let's go and see how it performs in our browser. So back in our browser, we come in and we refresh and we have favorite university here. Now there's a thing about favorite university. If I start typing maybe K, you see KNUST pops up. It will pop up from the list of items I have here, right? If I type anything apart from that, my list of options wouldn't pop up for the autocomplete. So if I type K and that pops up, I can just go and then select and I have KNUST there. That is how we do autocomplete in forms. Okay, we use a data list, and the list contains options that the user might type. And when you do that, you try to constrain them from, and if they type, sometimes you can use a validation and say that if that is in your JavaScript or PHP, you can say if any of the values by this ID given doesn't correspond to UDS, KNUST, this, that, then ask them to reselect again. Okay, so it's very helpful to know how autocomplete is done. And autocomplete is than using data lists. Okay, data list. So that's an option which is available. A lot of people, it depends on what you want to do. Okay, sometimes you have a list that you want to constrain the user, or you want to suggest to the user what they can select. Okay, and that's available. Let's move to other special. Um, the other thing is a progress bar. Okay, progress bar also exists, and you can implement a progress bar, setting the value, and you want it to show some level of progress. And that is used, that's implemented using the progress tags. Okay, and you set a value for it in your attribute. The value is an attribute. The maximum is also an attribute. Okay, then you can write whatever you want showing up in there. Let's go practice it and then see. Um, so, and we have a div here, separate our content for us. And we have a progress bar here using the word progress. And you see the value on the max pops up because that's what we're doing. And let's say we want a value of 40 and the max is 100. Okay, so it will kind of look for 40 out of 100 and then put there. And then if we specify that, oh, that's 40% here, then we can close the progress. Okay. And let's see how that gets to look in our browser. So that's 40% of it. If I specify 80%, it's going to read like 80%, value of 80. We're going to read the value of 80% here out of this. So it kind of shows a ratio out of 80 out of 100. Okay. And that's useful for what do I say? That's useful for something. And like usually you can have a label and say a label that says current progress. So if a person is filling a form 1, form 2, form 3, step 1, step 2, step 3, for each progress, you can give it a certain percentage. That's if you have 4 steps or 5 steps, then each increment is 20%. Each increment is 20%. So the first page can be 20 out of 100. The next page can be 40 out of 100 and continues that way. So progress bars are sometimes useful depending on what you are doing. So current progress, yeah, okay. And that's another way, another input. But there are special elements, so you don't see inputs there, just like data list, just like text area. These are special elements that do not follow the normal input. So let's continue. And meter does a similar thing. Okay, meter does a similar thing. Meter has a name which is used for the label, and it has a value just like this one. It has a minimum and it has a maximum. Okay, so this one has a minimum and it has a maximum and it has a value, a certain value in it. So let's try meter out to see how it looks. First, we create a div, and then this label is for, because we don't have a name here. So the usual thing goes. Okay. Let's look at meter. And we can have a value, a maximum, a minimum, and a maximum, right? So the minimum is 0, maximum is 10, and the value is, let's say, 6. And we can say 60%. Good. Let's go see how it looks. But every input, you can give it a name. The name helps the label to grab it. Okay. So I can give this a name, say battery life, battery, or disk space or something. So we go experiment with this and we see how it looks. It's similar to the progress, similar to the progress. And all of these, you can style the colors, you can change things according to how you want them. Okay. The final thing we'll dwell on are buttons. Button. And at the end of every form, there's a button. When you kick it in, it helps it to submit. So there is a submit button. So we have a button and the type is submit. And what we write here is what shows up. So in this case, we implemented one already. So we have a button here, right? The button is the type is a submit button. But when I click this button, it's going to submit what I have in my form. And what I show here is what is going to, so I wrote subscribe. So when we come into, so we have subscribe there. If I change it and say apply, if it's a form that I'm sending an application or my details for a job, and I say apply, I come here, apply is going to pop up here. Okay. So that's what happens in between. It's a button, right? We have the tag, button tag, a button tag, a button like this, tag, okay? And it has a type. So instead of input and type submit, it has a button. And you can also have a reset button, right? A reset button that allows you to reset. When the person clicks, it's going to reset. So let's implement that and see. Let's say we've selected certain, we've written certain things. We have things here. Let me first refresh. We have things here. When I hit reset, as you can see, everything has gone back to the default, irrespective of what was selected. So if I have some details filled, and there are two options actually, you can have a reset or submit. It's always advisable. If the person doesn't want to move ahead, they can reset. But if they want to move ahead, then they should submit. Okay, so your first one is submit. And your second one is reset. Okay. And when we pop, we have submit and reset. So if I say about myself and I don't want to, maybe I filled some details already and I don't want to submit, I can just click reset and it resets everything for us. Okay. But if I click submit, then it means I want to submit the details of my form. So there is a reset button as well. So now let's look at the last type of button we have. The last type of button we have is a button whose type. So the first two we dealt with the submit and the reset, right? This one's type is just button. Okay, it's a normal button, but sometimes you give it certain functionalities that on click maybe do something, right? So on click, alert is a JavaScript and on click to is designed for JavaScript. Alert, good day. It means that pop up good day when this button is on click. It's clicked, and you can give it a detail to say greeting. So if we come here over to our browser and then refresh, we should see greetings there. And when I click, it will run this JavaScript we have here. So sometimes you can have a button that you can set a function to and say, on click, do something in JavaScript. So run a particular function. If you have a function called pop-up, you can say pop-up, run pop-up. Okay. So when that button is clicked, it's going to run the function pop-up in your JavaScript. So sometimes buttons, apart from the submit and the reset, they can also perform certain functionality. With this, we've come to the end of our HTML forms. And I hope it was an exciting journey. First, we spoke about forms. Importantly, certain attributes in forms, action and method. We said action tells the page where to go when the form is submitted, the data where it should go, and the post or the get is like how the data should be submitted. And we spoke about the form attributes too. We said EncType is implemented when you have files to upload. No validate, disable the browser validation. We also spoke about the various form of inputs, right? The basic inputs. And we spoke about text, how it's implemented, password, emails, telephone numbers, dates, date look. I would say this one is used more for appointments, and this one for normal, like when we want to select things from the calendar or from the date. And we have color, we have range to being implemented. Range was similar to it has a button that allows you to select from a volume, okay, or from a meter in a way. Meters and other ones do not have any button that allows you to select. The upload to is for files. And we spoke about checkboxes. One important thing we said about checkboxes is that checkboxes allow you to select multiple items at the same time. And radio buttons, however, on the other side, do not allow you to select multiple items. Only one item can be selected. And we spoke about the select dropdown that you can implement that to select one item. If you need the user to select only one item, then you do that. If you need them to select multiple items, you can implement the multiple select, and the user can hold control down and then select multiple items from the list, from the drop-down list. And we spoke about text area, special elements which come with their own tags. Text area is one of them. Data list is one of them. And we spoke about progress bar too. It has its own tag, progress. Meter too has its own tag. So these are not basic inputs, so we don't use inputs for them. And buttons also have their own tags. And we spoke about the three types of buttons we have. We have the submit, the reset, and a button that is not specialized to do anything, but you can give it certain functionalities by using onClick. OnClick is an attribute that allows you to implement JavaScript when it's clicked, or when it allows you to implement certain behaviors when the button is clicked. Okay. So that's it. I would advise that you don't make forms too lengthy. For this one, it was an example. So we're kind of demonstrating almost everything, right? But ideally, keeps your forms very short so that users easily fill. If you have a lengthy form, the truth is most users will run away from your forms. And if you still need a lot of data, then you try and then break your form down into pages. Okay? When they fill the step one, short details, categorize them, okay, according to how they'll be filling them. So if you fill the step one, then they move to the step two, then they move to the step three, and it continues that way. Okay. But it shouldn't be so lengthy that it discourages the user along the way. Okay. I wish you all the best as we complete the form. So far, we've gone through the HTML introduction, we've gone through HTML5 features that were implemented, the advantages that came with it. We've gone through the head, what goes into the head tag, in between the head tag. What are some of the tags? We said metadata links, scripts, and style tags. And we spoke about the body as well. If you haven't seen any of these videos, I encourage you to try and then take a look at them because they are quite informative and they build on each other. You understand forms better if you understand, if you've seen the HTML5 video and you've seen the semantic and non-semantic parts, they inform you. I wish you all the best as we go on this journey or as we end HTML. The beautiful thing is, I'll continue to do more videos on CSS, on JavaScript, on other likewise frameworks that are used in industry. So keep looking to this page from time to time. Possibly subscribe so that once a video is released, you have it or you have a notification. Thank you. Bye.